Good afternoon, colleagues. We have an exciting panel right now. The panel has a fairly long title. This is about sustainability standards and transforming the super region that we are in right now. And basically, we'll be discussing with our panel the sustainability framework that is fit for purpose for the super region. So we have with us three distinguished panelists. Stacy Hope, she's Managing Director, Women in Mining. Aidan Lee, CEO and co-founder of GraphJet Technology, Malaysia. And Julian Traeger, CEO of Kotek Investments. Yes, so without further ado, let me start the conversation. Julian, if I may come to you with the first question. So whenever we talk about sustainability standards or framework, the first term that comes to our mind is ESG, Environmental, Social, and Governance Framework. ESG framework has been in place for a while. So Julian, would you tell us, do you think this ESG standards that has evolved over the years, is that suitable for the critical mineral sectors that we have right now, especially in the super region?
Sure. Thank you for having me on the panel, and thanks for the question. You know, the ESG standards really originated in the mid-90s, so we're talking 30 years ago. And it was before the rise of global warming as a global concern. So I think it's time for a refresh. The ESG focus was a lot on communities affected by a particular mine. It wasn't on solving a global problem. So I think we now need to look more carefully at the weightings to make sure that, national development frameworks such as in the Kingdom and then global concern about climate change and warming need to be given greater prominence. It should be an evolving set of standards.
Thank you, Julian. Any comment from Stacy or Aidan?
Yeah, I'll jump in right away.
Please.
Yes. So I guess upon reflection, I lean more to the SDGs because that answers a much wider issue. And I think this goes to your comment there, Julian, about it needing to be more holistic and need to be more all-inclusive. But at the same time, we have to understand that a super region like the one that we're in right now is contextually different from the ones in which we're creating these standards. And that is a fundamental issue if we don't have not only the government officials participating in the development of these standards, but the communities themselves being an active participant in defining what those are. So I tend to look more at the SDGs as well as the national determined contributions, the NDCs, because then that goes to a much more granular issue within the context of the region.
Yeah. Stacey, I'll turn to you. You mentioned community, you mentioned in the impact. So one of the things that we observe in the mining sector, not just in critical mineral sector, that there's always a tension between that local community and the mining sort of actor in that community. Often it's an adversarial relationship. And why is that? Why there is such a negative sort of relationship between the miners and the communities? What can be done about that?
So there are many, it's a very big question and we don't have all day to answer. Well, I don't have all day to answer it,
yeah.
But maybe focusing on two issues.
Yeah.
First, when we talk about the communities, who are we talking about, right? And which communities? So within the communities, I do a lot of work with artisanal and small-scale miners. And they're often seen as a threat to mining companies and their agenda or their alignment to global regulations and global standards if we have ASMs on site that we can't account for in terms of a responsible way of practicing mining. So they pose a threat to mining companies, or at least a perceived threat to mining companies if we don't understand how we can actually work together. But there are initiatives there that actually add impact and add value there. But I'll wait until later maybe to give some examples. On the other hand, when it comes to communities as a whole, it's really about beneficiation and not understanding what the communities want and how to come up with a solution that is co-designed with the communities and the mining companies. We're still coming from an ego of we know best because we're defined from a Western or a global North identity. But if we were to think about a more co-designed approach, that negative adversary relationship will start to dissipate.
Thank you. Any reaction to what Stacy just mentioned, Julian or Aidan?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think there needs to be, particularly in this region, which is starting with a much cleaner sheet of paper and not the historic legacy. And one of the problems also of mining is it's permanent. And so what the West has seen is, the results of 200 years of mining, which hasn't always been responsible, but still to be seen. I think in this region, because of the freshness and the newness of the opportunity, things can be done much better, and a much more collaborative and less confrontational approach makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and mining companies recognize this. They're recognizing it. It's about the level of investment that we're willing to make in order to see it through and ensure that it's sustainable. But we see it all the time, the investment, the social investment into communities. But how are we measuring the long-term impact, and how are we looking at impact in the future as opposed to in maybe a more immediate future or present?
Yeah, Aidan, if I can come to you. This is a forum on critical minerals, but critical minerals can come from many different sources, not just from mining, also from recycling or using the waste product. And I understand that you are leading a process where you're turning waste into a critical mineral. Explain how that works in terms of contributing to the net zero ambition that we have, and promoting sustainability, and whether that can be a sort of a standard approach for other minerals as well.
Yep, of course. People are start to more cautious about climate change, net zeros, taking action into sustainabilities. Policy supports, funds, the governments are supporting all these sustainabilities, net zero actions, the business activities, or whatever action that can lead us to be a better climate change, compared to what brought us until now. And like Dr. Hamid had mentioned, not just mining, like ourselves, our companies, we are recycling of biomass waste in Malaysia, which is a landfill product in Malaysia, and we use it and we convert the waste to become a graphite and graphene. When it comes to climate change, we tend to solve a problem while create another bigger problem, whereby EVs come into the picture to solve the net zero problems, and people are rushing into mining of graphites, graphenes to supply for the battery makers. And then because of the mining activities are getting limited resources, the price is going up, and you can see there's a lot of automakers that are cutting down all the costs while using all the impurities, graphites, or raw material in their batteries. That's why it costs a lot of EV car batteries on self-incinerators and got burns nowadays. Yep.
Thank you. Julian, would you like to come in terms of recycling?
I think recycling is a real trend that's just going to grow over the next couple of decades. And it's another example of the way in which ESG metrics need to be altered. I was speaking to somebody earlier today who was explaining how difficult it is when you're doing recycling to do the level 1 emission calculations and how expensive it is. Whereas I think, if you're doing recycling, which is clear it's recycling and not mining, there should be perhaps laxer standards on, level 1, because it's the level 3, which is really the important one for the globe. So I think the evolving nature of our industry, including recycling, including investing more in communities in a collaborational manner, all of that needs to be taken into account now in a 30-year review of what ESG measurements should be.
Julian, in your initial remarks, you talked about evolving ESG standards because it is kind of old, it's not really fit for purpose. So part of the ESG is the governance, and governance matters a lot in terms of accountability, in terms of maintaining a relationship with the community. So what aspect of governance needs to change within the ESG framework, you think, especially in the super region?
Well, I think, going back to Stacey's point, more collaboration on governance rather than criticizing on governance.
Yeah.
Things need to be designed from the beginning in a better way. In the future, hopefully, we're going to have cars that are designed to be recycled. But that sort of thinking of how to build something for the long term is very important. And I also think we are realizing that this industry is a very complex industry and it needs a lot of expertise. For a while in the UK, there was a virtue in having people ignorant of the sector running the companies because they brought a different perspective. I think that's really been disproved. So I think more expertise, more collaboration, less confrontation, and more inclusion is truly the way to go. And on governance as well, while there needs to be diversity, it really needs to be truly diverse.
Yeah.
Not diverse people from the same sort of background.
Thank you. Stacey, would you agree?
I completely agree.
I thought there would be some disagreements here, no? We're all agreeing with each other.
No, well, we have to agree with this in the sense that we have had many people in this room who have often been excluded from the conversation and from the meaningful conversations, from the disrupting conversations that will actually lend itself to a more meaningful, more responsible mining sector. One of the things that we do at Women in Mining UK is around the advocacy of women in the industry. But I can talk to other women about women in mining, but what is the impact there? Most of us, I'd love to think all of us, know that we need more women in the industry and we need more meaningful participation of women in the industry. I need to talk to the men in the room, right? And not only talk to you or talk at you, we need to have that meaningful, disrupting conversation as to, well, how does it work? How do we disrupt the social narrative that we've created in the mining sector in order to actually have this meaningful diversity, inclusion, equity, etc.? And how do we end up belonging into?
I also think, by the way, age is very important.
Very important.
So we need to have much more involvement of younger people because they're the future on boards. It shouldn't be all people of a certain age. And one of the problems of the sector is lack of training. But there are people who are visionaries of a younger generation. They need to be heard more.
Oh, absolutely. But then there's a conversation that we're having now about more young people in the conversation. And a lot of the older people in the conversation think that means that we need to push you out in order for more young people to come in. But that actually is a hindrance. We need the expertise, we need the understanding of mistakes made in the past so that we can build on what to do next. But we need that collaboration, again, in order to define what that looks like.
So in your earlier remarks, you mentioned that you have some stories to tell us in terms of one of the things that we discussed early on, that the tension that between the community and the mining entities at the macro level. So that comes from the idea that it's often seen as a zero-sum game, where somebody is winning and somebody is losing. How do we turn into a positive-sum game? Are there good examples that you can share with us that where we are able to build good social outcome and the perception also changed over time and mining is seen as a positive sum game or a win-win outcome for the community.
Absolutely. I'd like to move away from using well, actually I will still use a major, but using a solely major mining company example. I'll use two. I'd say first, as Women in Mining UK, just looking at the women in mining ecosystem globally that's developing here in Saudi, which I think is very important, as well as in countries like Mali, Senegal, DRC, where you have had a gendered issue in terms of women's participation in certain sectors. And having those organizations play an active role and being recognized in those jurisdictions is a way in which we're seeing disruption and more positive outcomes. Another is more ASM, artisanal small-scale mines. I gave that example earlier. There's an organization that I'm associated with called the Fair Cobalt Alliance. And that ultimately is working with the major mining companies in cobalt, of course, because it's the Cobalt Alliance. But also, we have the traders, we also have the end users, the consumers, the OEMs who are participating in this initiative. And that ultimately is to help develop the ecosystem of the communities and the community miners to be a professional, notable participant in the mining sector, to be a part of that mining value chain, because ultimately communities want to participate in mining. They understand the mining market, right? So it's about...
They're the receiving end,
Yes, so they need to also be a part of the mining practice itself.
Thank you. Aiden, if I may come to you. So we are talking about sustainability standards, and I think it boils down to often environmental standards, because ultimately environment has become a major issue, climate crisis we're facing right now. So for the super region, what kind of standards that can be a fit for purpose framework for environmental sustainability in this region? What can be done?
I think that referring to the economist, John Nash, we're talking about Nash equilibriums, you cannot have both and another. Both have to look at the same papers, like what Julian has mentioned, that the framework, the policy and the acts, we need a new fashion designer to redesign, to reframe the whole policy, not just fighting the fault of each parties, other countries, how to penalize them on how much of carbon emissions you are emitting out to the environments, how much you have done for the climate change instead. But we can complement each other, work together and collaborate together, to find out the right solution, like what we have done, recycling the landfill, a biomass waste product to be a high value products. It will be a good, ecosystem, creating a supply chain of good platforms, a greener supply chain to supply to the world,
Thank you. I think we're coming to an end. So in terms of what Stacy mentioned, that we need to have a more holistic approach. I think SDGs adopted by the UN member states in 2015 provides a very good framework for us in terms of looking at the total impact, not just the impact at the community level or the country level, but at the global level. And this is the kind of an approach that we need to take to tackle the challenges that we face right now. The climate change is not a local problem or a regional problem, it's a global problem. So we need that kind of holistic approach to environmental standards when it comes to mining and critical minerals. So I think we have a few minutes, I believe, right? 5? Okay, we have 5 minutes for Q&A. The floor is open, so please raise your hand, and we have the mic here to help you. In the back. And if you can introduce yourself.
How's it going, everyone? Thanks for the presentation. Matt Jervich from Jet Capital Advisors in New York. I have a question for Aiden in GraphJet. Can you tell us a little bit more about Malaysia and Southeast Asia's focus on the supply chain for the battery industry, and how this can be a really important aspect of building out that supply chain that connects the rest of the world to China, who ostensibly runs the battery industry today?
Thank you for the questions. Recently, China has imposed a ban of graphites start on 1st of December last year. And a lot of countries start to panic, stockpiling all the graphite, especially because graphite became such a critical raw material for anodes, which is the storage part of the battery. And there's such a good opportunity for our company as well as Malaysia, whereby we are the second largest palm oil producer in the world, come after Indonesia, and we're able to convert the waste of the palm kernel shell to become a graphite and graphene and supply to the world. So we're talking about the supply chain in Malaysia or Southeast Asia. Of course, China will still have the lead. And looking at the trade war, the export ban of the graphite, you will create a new supply chain and ecosystem across some other countries, especially in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand as well. As Indonesia do have a lot of nickels, and Malaysia will be part of the Malaysia contributors. We're able to convert the waste to become anode materials, Yep.
Maybe we have time for one more question from the audience. Anyone from this side? I see none. In that case, any final last word or word of wisdom from the panelists? 30 seconds each. Yeah, Stacy, we'll start with you. Yeah.
Words of wisdom. Hopefully I have some wisdom to give, but maybe it's how do we ensure that we are contextualizing the sustainability frameworks that we're using, and I'm using sustainability quite strategically in this context, because I do believe that the SDGs will ultimately guide the mining sector into being more responsible.
Thank you. Aiden?
Yeah, I think complement each other, collaborate together within all the companies, the country, not just a local challenge, but a global challenge will be taken into consideration to think out of the box, to have a better solutions. Recycle.
Thank you. Julian, you have the final word.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, but I think this region and this country have a real opportunity to become thought leaders in the reinvention, the evolution of the ESG standards as the world evolves, particularly also involving a lot of automation and AI and how that helps the process.
Yeah.
Thank you. Colleagues, please join me with a round of applause for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.